Have you ever wondered why one idea just takes off, It spreads like wildfire across the globe, while another idea, maybe even a more brilliant one, just fizzles out. It can feel like it's all down to luck or some kind of magic. But what if it's not? What if influence could actually be engineered? Okay, let's get into it.
Right. This is the big question, isn't it? We're going to unpack the science behind why some messages stick and spread while others just vanish. Think of this as a look under the hood at the actual engine of persuasion. So, here's our game plan. First, we're going to reframe influence as a science. Then, we'll dive deep into understanding your audience, crafting a story that actually connects, engineering that story to go viral, and then finally, we'll put it all together into a strategic playbook.
Let's kick things off with a pretty radical idea. What if influence has nothing to do with being a natural, charismatic person? The core concept we're digging into here is that you can treat influence less like some mysterious art and more like an engineering discipline with a process you can actually repeat. And there's a name for this process: influence development. It's basically a strategic framework for moving beyond just guesswork and gut feelings. It's about creating a message that gets heard, that gets adopted, and crucially, that gets shared. The big takeaway? This is a system you can learn and use again and again. Everything, and I mean everything, starts with the who. Before you can even think about crafting a message, you have to understand the mind that's going to receive it, and not just who they are on the outside, but what's really going on the inside. Let's see how that works. The key tool for this is something called psychographics. Demographics will tell you what people are, their age, their location, but psychographics, that tells you who they are. It's the study of their values, their goals, their deepest interests. It's basically the blueprint of their internal world.
So how do we start building out this psychological blueprint? Well, it begins with the first layer, AIOs. This stands for activities, what people do with their time, interests, what they're curious about, and opinions, what they believe about the world. These are the absolute fundamental building blocks of a person's lifestyle and how they see everything.
Now, once you have those AIO building blocks, you start to see patterns emerge. These individual traits begin to cluster together into broader segments. A classic example is the VALS framework, which groups people into types like innovators or believers. And just like that, you're not just talking to a random crowd anymore. You're talking to a very specific mindset. But we can go even deeper than that. The Schwartz Values Wheel is a fantastic tool for getting at the core drivers of our behavior. It maps out our fundamental values, and this is the important part, the tensions between them. Things like the constant pull between openness to change and conservation. Knowing where your audience falls on this map tells you what really motivates them. For instance, if you're trying to sell an electric car, you tell the openness group all about the futuristic tech, but you tell the conservation group how it saves money and keeps their family's future secure. See? Same product, totally different message. When you combine all these layers, the AIOs, the segments, the core values, you create what's called a psychogram. And this isn't just some static list of traits. No, it's a dynamic map of a person's mind. It shows you how their drives, their fears, and their goals all connect and interact to create their own unique internal story. This is the level of understanding we need to get to. Okay, so we've mapped the mind. Now what? The next step is to build a message, a story, that can actually navigate that very specific psychological landscape. And this is where the incredible power of narrative comes into play. The skill you need for this is called narrative intelligence. And this isn't just about being a good storyteller. It's about being able to see the patterns in the stories people already believe about themselves, and then crafting a new narrative that slots perfectly into their existing worldview. Now, this is a really crucial distinction to make. Every story really has two parts. You've got the fabula, which is the what. It's just the raw chronological sequence of events. But then you have the sujet, and that's the how, the strategic way you arrange and frame those events to get the maximum emotional punch. Real influence is all about mastering the sujet. And here we have a really actionable process for doing just that. You start with your own values, then you find communities that align with them. You profile their existing beliefs, you map out who their heroes and villains are, and then you chart what's called the stream of acceptances. That's the mental journey they need to take to adopt your idea. Finally, you create the actual content to guide them right down that path. So, you've mapped the mind, you've crafted the perfect narrative, but the job is not done. Not even close. How do you make it spread? This brings us to part 3, engineering your message for contagion. This really reframes the whole idea of virality. We tend to think of ideas spreading passively, kind of like a virus. But the field of cognitive mimetics shows it's a very active process. Think of it less like catching a cold and more like sharing a recipe. You have to see it, decide it looks good, choose to make it, maybe even tweak it a little, and only then do you pass it on. It's a series of conscious decisions. Observe, interpret, understand, and then decide to adopt and replicate an idea. So, why does someone choose to adopt an idea in the first place? To make the recipe. Well, it comes down to a few key reasons. Is it actually useful? Does it align with my group's norms? Does it reinforce who I am? Is the source credible? Does it just feel plausible? And does it help me make sense of the world? Your message has to tick these boxes. And adopting is only half the battle. What makes someone actually share it? For that, we turn to the famous STEPPS framework. We share things that give us social currency, make us look good, things that are triggered by our environment, that spark strong emotion, that are publicly visible, that have real practical value, and are wrapped up in compelling stories. All right, we've taken the entire engine of influence apart. We've looked at the mind, the narrative, and the mechanics of how ideas spread. So now for the final, most important step, putting it all back together into a powerful, cohesive system. This is the playbook. The biggest takeaway here is that influence isn't magic. It's a machine. It's a system. It has inputs, processes, and outputs that you can actually understand and optimize. And all the frameworks we've just talked about, that's the blueprint for building that machine. Now, this might look a little complicated at first, but this is the whole system in action. This is the Agile Influence Development Vortex. And you can see all the pieces we've talked about, the audience mapping, the content strategy, the feedback, they're all working together in a continuous loop. It's not a straight line, it's a cycle. And that's really the secret sauce. This isn't a linear one-and-done process. It's an iterative cycle. You create something, you put it out there and engage, you evaluate the results, and then you feed that learning right back into the beginning to make your next approach even better. It's a system that's designed to learn and improve over time. So we've just walked through the blueprint for engineering influence. It's an incredibly powerful set of tools that can be used to spread ideas that really matter. Which means the final question isn't about how to spread a message anymore. It's about what message you'll choose to spread.